What do you do if a Japanese person asks you about
the atomic bomb?
Hey guys, my name's Allison and I was a jet from 2018 to 2020, and today I'm going to go over the interview process that I had when I interviewed in 2018 and just the questions they asked and the overall flow of the interview. So I interviewed at the Miami consulate in 2018, February, I think. So the interviews are going to be different based on the consulate, just who's interviewing you. But in general, I think they have about the same list of questions they draw from, or at least they seem to be pretty similar. So regardless of what consulate you'll be interviewing at, I hope this can help you out. So do not be late for the interview. I got to the general area about an hour ahead of time, and I just sat at a Starbucks for half an hour, and then I went to the actual office building where it was going to be held in about 30 minutes beforehand. And once I arrived there, I went through a security check because it is a consulate. And then I was instructed to sit down in the lobby area. They had a jet alumni there. This probably just depends on the consulate, and I don't know if they'll be doing it this year. So I just talked to him for, a few minutes while I was waiting. Let me just mention really quick, please wear a formal business suit. Preferably all black, because if you do go to Japan, you'll need an all black suit no matter what. But if you don't have time or you can't afford an all black suit, then just the most formal thing you own is probably going to be best. So after about 30 minutes had passed, I was called into the interview room, and there was a panel of 3 different judges there waiting for me. So I think the panel composition is generally about the same. It might be a little different. For me, it was 1 jet coordinator, 1 Japanese woman who I think might have worked at the consulate, and then the 3rd was another Japanese person who probably worked at the consulate, but he didn't really talk much. So after I went into the room and I sat down, because I had indicated on my application that I could speak some Japanese, they went right ahead with the Japanese section from the beginning. So if you didn't say that you could speak any Japanese, then you probably won't have to do this part of the interview. But if you put any sort of ability down on the application, you probably will be tested on it here. So there were 3 different questions I was asked, and they basically went from easy, medium to more difficult. So the first question was they just asked me to give a basic self-introduction in Japanese. This is something you should learn in the first semester of Japanese 101 at college. Just your name, how old you are, that type of thing. So the second question, it got a little bit more difficult, and they asked where I live. So maybe try to look that type of thing up, how to say your state and town name in, katakana version. And then the third question was actually a little bit difficult because I hadn't prepared for it. They asked what my favorite book was, and they asked me to briefly explain the story. I said it was Harry Potter just because I knew some of the vocabulary that I could go along with it. If you're unable to answer the questions, don't worry, they'll just mark it down on your application. I don't think it's going to lose you the job or anything. I think your Japanese ability might just add a few more points to your application. So then after I answered all those questions correctly-ish, they asked me in Japanese how long I'd been studying Japanese. But after that, we switched to the English portion of the interview, which is gonna cover the majority. So generally, I think the questions were pretty easy all around, but there were a few that were really hard to respond to. So the first question is why jet? Why do you want to do jet over, say, Interac? Why do you want to go to Japan over Korea? Things like that take into consideration. I think an easy-ish answer for this would just be to say that you like the jet programs like grassroots cultural exchange method. You should definitely prepare for that question though, because I think it's going to be asked no matter what. But for me, I was able to add a little personal spin because I was able to say that my supervisor at work had done jet and talked about how much they loved it, that type of thing. If you have any sort of personal connection to jet, I would definitely mention it here. So the next question was, would the inaka be okay? The Japanese countryside. They ask this because they need to make sure that you won't just quit if you get an inaka placement. So really, even if you want or prefer Tokyo, you should probably say yes to this question, or I think it could impact your chances of getting the job, honestly. So moving on, the next question was why did I choose the placements I had made in the little request form on the application. Honestly, I didn't have any really good reasons, just that I had studied abroad there before and that type of thing. you probably won't get your placements if you can't come up with a good reason right here. So if you really want to go to Tokyo or something, for example, think of a good reason that connects to you personally that you can tell them. So yeah, suffice to say, I didn't get any of my placement requests. So the next question was actually really hard for me. They asked me to choose 3 things to bring to represent America. I was like completely caught off guard for this question. I had no idea what to do. I think if you're from like Australia or something, it might be a little easier, because you could say like, I don't know, kangaroos or something like that. If you are like a minority in America, I think this will be maybe a bit easier to answer because you can connect it to that. So God, I don't even really remember what I said because I was so panicked. I think I just said something like, because I was from Florida, I'd bring like seashells or something. Honestly, I didn't give a really good answer, and I find this question really hard. So I would just suggest you really think about this one before your interview. So the next question was, they asked how I would spend my time outside of work if I were to go on jet. I answered that I would spend it volunteering just because I had done that in the past. Reality is I did not do any volunteering in Japan. It's a lot harder than you think, especially if you're in the Inaka and you don't speak Japanese. But if you have like a hobby or something, like say you want to join the local soccer club or something like that, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be all like philanthropy based or anything like that. I think they just want an answer that says you will go and be active in the community, regardless of whether or not you actually will do that. Just say you will. So the next question was, they asked if I would be involved in any bukatsu or clubs, after school clubs on jet. I said I'd be interested in like helping out with an English club. The reality is, you know, it didn't really happen. Bukatsu are kind of reserved for high school jets, which I wasn't. Some people will like go to some bukatsu after class, but it's a lot harder to like actually be an advisor for a bukatsu that's not English club. And a lot of middle schools just don't have English clubs. And it's like unpaid labor half the time, so. But yeah, just answer that you're open to it. So now the interview is winding down. They got a bit more into my resume side of things. They asked me to describe my time at my internship. I think they specifically asked me about this internship because it was kind of like Japan related. So just have like a short little speech about what you've done at, you know, your past internships, your past part-time jobs, that type of thing. Ideally, if you can connect it to Japan or teaching or, you know, children in some way, do it, but I don't think it matters too much. I think they just want to see that you haven't, you know, outright lied. So this question might be a little bit more difficult to answer if, say, you're in nursing or something like that. But regardless, I think you can always connect it back to something like intercultural communication, things like that, because these types of things really apply to any job. So then the last question they asked me was, what are my plans if I don't get jet? So there's different approaches you can take with this question, and I personally took the approach of, even if I didn't get jet, I would still find a way to go to Japan. I think answering like this really shows that you're serious about wanting to go to Japan, and it shows that, you know, even if you don't get it, you will find other ways for yourself to teach English in Japan. And I think that really communicates your passion for it and how you're more willing to accept the job if it's offered to you. So then they just asked if I had any questions. And, you know, I think you should always ask at least one question, even if you don't have any questions. So just come up with a question that's specific to you if you can. But if you are struggling for one, then I think an easy one to fall back on is something like asking the jet coordinator how his or her experience as a jet was. Because I'm pretty sure all of these people who are coordinating jet have done jet in the past. So in total, the interview was about 20 minutes long. If you don't have a Japanese section, maybe it's a little shorter, or they might supplement that with a few more questions. So you might be thinking that, yeah, my interview really wasn't that hard in the grand scheme of things. You know, I showed up professionally dressed, I was prepared, I did plenty of research ahead of time, and I really did want the job. But don't, you know, there's so many other questions you could be asked. So 2 questions that my friends were asked that I was not. One was the famous, the dreaded for Americans, the question, what do you do if a Japanese person asks you about the atomic bombs? that America dropped in World War II? There is a right answer here, and the right answer is do not engage with the question. Do not get into an argument. Do not bring up politics. Certainly don't bring this up on your own. The right answer here is something like that you'll try to, redirect the conversation and not talk about this question. Because right now you're not just an American, you are representing the JET program, and they don't want you to get into, an international argument over something like this, because God knows how it could blow up in your face. So something else you should definitely prepare for that one of my friends was asked to do was giving a sample lesson. So definitely don't worry about doing this perfectly, especially if you don't have any teaching experience. They just want to see if you can, be spontaneous and, not be too nervous to do anything in front of a room of strangers, even if it is an interview. So common topics for this would be things like the weather or colors, maybe alphabet. I think colors is a super easy one if you're free to come up with a topic on your own. You can just point to things in the room and ask about what color that is, your clothes, other people's clothes, ask them to repeat after you, that type of thing. There's plenty of great lesson plan samples on YouTube, so definitely check them out, but it won't be a long one. It'll just be maybe a minute or two long. So really don't stress too much about it. The key is not how well you teach the subject, it's that you're not afraid to teach the subject. So yeah, that was the whole interview. I was super nervous the whole time, but I actually walked away from it feeling pretty good about myself. And then, you get the results about a month and a half later. So you definitely need to prepare for this interview. And if you don't prepare, you will find yourself in trouble. But that being said, don't stress over it so much that you're just dreading it and you're so nervous you can't speak. Because as long as you act confident, you'll be fine. Alright you guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. See you again. Bye!